Alright, I'm going to talk about reading today. Now, reading makes me happy. I have talked recently about education and how important I think education is, and self-educating using YouTube and so on. Before YouTube and social media and learning from those type of platforms, I was learning a little bit from books or biographies and stuff like that. And I'm just going to take you through certainly some books that I've read recently, and this one as well. This is the first one that really made an impact on me. Alright, Bravo 20. Maybe some of you have read it before. It's quite a famous book, certainly in the UK. Bravo 20 by Andy McNab. Andy McNab was the patrol commander of the SAS troop that went behind enemy lines in the first Gulf War in 1991 when this took place. And yeah, no, the reason why this made such an impact on me, because at the time I was doing judo at a good level, and I thought I was training hard, and I was training hard, except I didn't realise that there were many levels to fitness, and many levels to suffering, and the things that people can go through, and what the human body can go through and cope with. And reading this book, obviously that was for them when their mission went wrong behind enemy lines and they had to walk to Syria. I think they had to walk 300 kilometers, which is obviously a long way in order to get to safety, the safety of Syria as it was at the time. And they had to not just go against the enemy, but they were against the elements as well. They all had hypothermia. They obviously had the fear element with the enemy on their tail, and that the weather was a massive issue, probably the biggest thing really. That was the thing that killed one of them, and certainly hindered all of them at certain times. I think a number of them got captured. About 4 of them got captured. 3 of them got killed, and 1 of them got away. So there is a book also called The One That Got Away by Chris Ryan, who was part of this patrol, and I've actually read that as well, and met Chris Ryan on a train when I was going to some training events in Camberley, or training facility in Camberley. I actually got on the train, and I actually happened to be reading a Chris Ryan book, and he happened to get on the train as well, and strangely he was doing a book signing in Camberley at the same town where I was actually going, and because I was reading one of his books, we got chatting, and for about an hour and a half we actually spoke about obviously some of his career, but he seemed more interested in me really, and what I did in judo, which is probably because he was didn't want to say too much in terms of what he did, because that's sort of what they do at the SAS, and also what I did was, I guess, fairly interesting to him as well, and he said he'd also done judo, so that was quite interesting to have have something in common. Okay, next book I'm going to go on to is called The Rules of Life. Alright, now that may not be one that you're familiar with. I think I don't think I actually bought this one. I think Claire, my wife Claire, actually bought this at an airport, and I ended up reading it, and I found it really good, really helpful. There are several, like over 100 rules in here, and it's split up into certain sections. So the sections are, let me just remind myself, so rules for you, so like the personal type of rules, and you see that there's the rules for you, but then there are several sections in the actual chapter which help you accept yourself, dedicate your life to something, be flexible in your thinking, various different things that it talks about. And then in the next section we have partnership rules, and then we have family and friends rules, and social rules. So there's different sections there, and lots of different rules within each section, and I found that really helpful. There's still quite a few things from that book that I got and applied to my own life, so I found that really helpful. There's probably a lot of things I did forget because it was a little while ago when I actually read this, and there's lots of things that I've probably forgotten, but lots of things that I did actually take from it. So that was I found that really useful. Next one, Bear Grylls. Bear Grylls, A Survival Guide for Life. You see there's actually like a makeshift bookmark in there at the minute. I think my kids are actually doing that as part of their homeschooling. They're just working their way through it, and the reason is because you can dip in and out of this book same as you could the last one, because it's basically laid out as a series of rules again. I think there's maybe about 75 rules, and these are all like little lessons from Bear Grylls. If you don't know Bear Grylls, I think a lot of you will. Bear Grylls is an adventurer. He's a TV celebrity, ex-military. I think he was SAS as well, but the reserve SAS, and he obviously has a lot to. He's a very experienced sort of outward bounder, and he does a lot of these shows, survival shows and stuff like that. But he sort of talks about a lot of the lessons that he's gained throughout his life, and he passes it on. This is really good for kids as well, so that's why my kids are reading it. There you go, Bear Grylls, A Survival Guide for Life. There you go. Next one. Okay, I've read this one fairly recently, so I've got a bit of recency bias with this one. I've read thousands of books, or hundreds anyway, and it's probably loads that I could review and that I really think are really beneficial and brilliant. But these are the ones I've read a little bit more recently, other than Bravo 20. So yeah, this one is one that I've read fairly recently, called The Chimp Paradox. Again, it's quite a famous book. It's done quite well. Sold lots of copies. The mind management. So yeah, what that's about basically is about how we use the different parts of our brain. All right, so we've got the logical part of our brain in the frontal lobe here, and then we've got like the more the older part of our brain, if you like, the more primitive part of our brain, which is which they call in the book the chimp brain. All right, so it's all about how we act in certain situations. A lot of you would have heard of fight and flight. You know, something say for instance quite scary happens, all of a sudden you make a decision to fight, flight or freeze, and a lot of the time you do that instinctively without really even thinking about it, and that's done with our chimp brain. And there's different ways that you can use the chimp brain to our advantage, and maybe kind of help the chimp brain kind of stay calm, and how we can control the chimp brain and stuff like that. So I found that really interesting, because that helps for the sport that I do. Obviously I don't compete really anymore, and obviously I coach now. I coach my son in judo, so that's really helpful for him. And on the front it says the mind program that helped me win my Olympic golds, by Sir Chris Hoy. So he's a cyclist, multiple Olympic gold medalist, so obviously that's been not just recommended by me, but somebody with very good sporting credentials as well. All right, now actually I'll go on to this one next. One I'm actually reading, at the moment, so I haven't actually quite finished it, but I'm a good way through it, as you can see, and I'm really enjoying it. And it's one that you may well have heard of, called Extreme Ownership, by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin, both US Navy SEALs, both leaders in their kind of different elements of the Navy SEALs. I think Jocko Willink has retired now, not sure about Leif Babin, but Jocko Willink has become a little bit more famous now. He's been on the Joe Rogan podcast a number of times. He has got his own podcast. I think it's just called the Jocko Podcast. But if you were to go on there and read this book, you'll find some really great stuff in terms of mindset, leadership, very strong leadership. That's what this is about. This is really good, because this is basically what they do. They tell a war story. One of the two of them tells a war story from their perspective, and then they tell you the principle of the lesson, and then they also tell you how it could be applied to business, and they then tell you like a business story, because they actually help businesses nowadays kind of overcome their issues, and with some leadership advice. So that's really, really good. Again, I'm obviously a judo coach, I'm a father as well, so if you're a parent, this is actually really good for that. You may think that that's completely different, you know, a leader in a war situation would be nothing like being a father or a mother, but you can apply a lot of this to parenting as well, so it might be a good one for you to pick up. I'm enjoying it, really good. Now this is probably my favourite book of all time, and this guy is probably, certainly at present, one of my biggest heroes. So quite similar, obviously, you know, there's a bit of a pattern going on, because obviously we had Andy McNabb and some of that military side, you know. Obviously we then had Bear Grylls, who's in the military. We then got Jocko Willink and Leif Babin, who are US Navy SEALs. So there's a little bit of a kind of a military theme going on, but I'm not a military person, never have been a military person, and I'm not even necessarily a military fan, but I just find a lot of the lessons that are learned through war and leadership and stuff like that are actually really good for putting into your own life in wherever it needs to slot in. And this particular one, Can't Hurt Me, by David Goggins. Again, you may have heard of David Goggins. He's got quite big on the internet recently. Social media is pretty big and stuff like that. So if you don't like swearing, don't listen to David Goggins, because he swears virtually every sentence. But he's, in my opinion, he's absolutely awesome. He's completely and utterly disciplined. I don't think there's a more disciplined person on earth. He does all these major kind of feats of endurance and these challenges. He's held world records before in various different things, including pull-ups. He does 100-mile races, you know, several times. You know, like week after week after week, he does these 100-mile races. He's done 200 and I think 240 something is probably his best. They're called Moab 240. I think they're called these races and stuff, which are ridiculous kind of races where people just run 240 miles until they either quit or finish, and he does lots and lots of those. And he was a Navy SEAL, so obviously that's where the link is with this. He was a Navy SEAL. He went through BUDS, which is like the training for the SEALs, 3 times actually. He did actually fail one time, but then there was one time when he actually got pulled out, and then he completed the 3rd time, which makes him sound like he's, you know, just pretty average. But if you read it, you'll realise the guy's not average at all. And what's more remarkable than anything is the fact that he was brought up, he was abused by his father, he was big, he put on a lot of weight. He got to about 300 pounds almost. I think it was 297 pounds, which, if you don't know pounds, if from the UK and stuff, that's what would that be? I'm not sure what that'd be, but that's well over 100 kilos, about 100, I don't know, 130 kilos. I don't really know. I might be totally wrong there, but he was a big guy, not Navy SEAL kind of stature, and he managed to transform his body, transform his mind more than anything, and become this, what you can only really describe as a machine, to be honest. And I'm not going to spoil it really. I'd want you to read it, but since reading it, I have completely changed the way I think, completely changed my ideas on what's possible. My discipline, I think, has improved a lot, and also my children I've told him some of David Goggins' stories and stuff, and that's kind of maybe put them in a different place mentally. And I've got a happiness group on Facebook, which I've posted some of his stuff on there, and I think, you know, you'll either love him or hate him. For me, I absolutely love the guy. I think he's amazing, but he's a real straight talker. So if you've got any issues, it's all about honesty, and he was honest with himself. You know, he called himself fat and called himself a loser and all that sort of thing, but not in a negative way. In order to be honest with himself, in order for him to shape up and sort his life out, basically. But it sounds all real. I'm not really putting it across amazingly, but if you haven't read it, read it. You'll either love it or hate it. I absolutely love it. So there you go. Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. Probably my favourite book, second favourite book, because obviously my favourite book is this one, World Class Happiness by Dominic King. That's me, by the way. Okay, and that's not really my story. That's about kind of how I found my I not found my happiness. I was always super happy. I was always super happy. I have said this in a previous video, but it was a kind of a realization as to how happy I actually was. And then I went on a little bit of a journey, a learning journey, to find out why I was so happy and why I wasn't so happy in certain elements and certain areas of my life. And I kind of was then able to use what I learned in order to kind of improve in some of those areas. And now I like to try and help others with the same lessons that I've learned, and hence why I've written the book, hence why I've started a YouTube channel. And I'm sure that anyone could do that. Anyone could do these things by just simply reading, going on YouTube, alright, self-educating basically. Alright, I'll leave you with that. Cool. I'm always on the lookout for a new book, so tell us your favourite book and why, and put it in the comments.